السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, today we'll go through the word to word in Surah Al Adiyat and some of the benefits in the Surah. Word to word and some of the benefits in the Surah, inshallah ta'ala. If you have the Mus'haf with you, or if you have memorized, and make sure also that taking notes. Going briefly, inshallah ta'ala, so that we have enough time to go through the words of the surah. As the surah, as we know, says Wal Adiyat Dabha. And Al Adiyat, as we know, the racers, comes from Al Adu, Ain Dal Waw. Ain Dal Waw. And the Waw in the beginning is the Waw al Qasam, swearing by Al Adiyat. And Al Adi, right, that's Al Adi is the one that runs fast, or the one that races. And that's the same thing with al-adu, the enemy, because the adu attacks the other party. And then all of the words that comes like this, adawa, almiti, i'tadaw, they transgressed, aduwi, my enemy, aduwakum, your enemy, like this. So, but here it refers to al-adiyat, refers to the horses, as we said, and some said the camels. So it comes from those who would run fast. So, and especially when they run against their enemy, والعاديات. So the racers, they run towards their enemies. والعاديات ضبحا. ضبحا is the sound, or they call it the panting. It comes from الضبح, ضاد باء حي حاء, which is the sound of the horses when they're breathing from their chests. And this is also the same thing they call it for the fox when it has these types of noises when it runs and so on. So it's the special noise that comes from the horses as a result of running fast. والعاديات ضبحا فالموريات, then, and the muriyat. Al-muriyat from waw ra ya. Muriya, that means those who would produce sparks. Muriyat. And this, the thing that, or that whatever they have in their hoofs that causes the sparking of the fire, or sparks when they run on the stones and things like this. And that's you can relate some of the words, even the word wuri anhuma min sawatihima, means has been covered. Right, but this is, you can find the resemblance there, but it's mainly the al-muriyat is the one that sparks or causes the sparks on the ground as a result of what's in their hoofs and the strength of their running. Qadaha means fal-muriyat qadaha, striking, from the same three letters qaf dal ha. So that's the striking. That's qadah. فالمغيرات, and the charges, مغيرات, those who attacks. الإغارة is to attack the enemies in the morning, basically. So it's a specific meaning, but it brings any time. But so they charges, or they attack their enemies, but mainly in the morning. فالمغيرات صبحا. صبحا at dawn, in the morning. فأثرنا. أثرنا, they then raise. أثرنا, and the noon refers to the horses. Comes from tha, waw, ra. Thawaran, also something that raises, or the same thing that they use it for the word revolution, because it's like it does to the people what the horses would do to the ground with all of the different raising the dust and so on. فأثرنا به, thereby. نقع. نقع is the dust, from the noon qaf ain. So that's the dust. نقع. نقع is the dust. فوسطنا, then penetrate in the center, from الوسط. وسط is the center. So they, because of their strength and their running fast, فوسطنا به, then they penetrate with this. جمع, collectively. The masses. And the jama', as we know, is collecting things. Inna, indeed, inna al-insana, talked about al-insan, either the first to forgetfulness or to have the uns or the companionship. لربه, to his Lord. إن الإنسان لربه لكنود. Surely, the lam here is lam al-tawkid, for sure. Kanud. Kanud is jahud, the one that has ungratefulness. Some also refers to al-kanud as the one that eats alone, the one that is ungrateful. So, and that comes from kaf nun dal. ربه لكنود وإنه, and indeed he, meaning the human being, على على ذلك, to that, لشهيد, surely is a witness. Whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that witnessed the actions of the human being or the human being, comes from sheen ha dal. وإنه, meaning indeed he is the human being. وإنه لحب الخير, لحب, in the love, حب is love, الخير, wealth, which is خير, any goodness. لشديد, شديد from sheen dal dal, intense, the severe and intense love. أفلا, but does not. يعلم, he knows, present tense. يعلم إذا, when. بعثر, بعثر will be scattered from the same three letters as the root of it. And بعثرت الشيء is when you overturn something, when you scatter something. So إذا بعثر ما, what, في القبور, the graves, from قاف باء راء. وحصل, حصل from حصل, that means made apparent, made clear. الحاصل is when you get something to be clear. وحصل ما في الصدور. وحصل ما في الصدور, what's in the الصدور, the chests, and it refers to the heart. From صدر. الصدور is, as we talked about, even when you move from one place to the other, because it's the movement of a person, that the first thing that comes is his front part. Inna, indeed, inna rabbahum, their Lord, bihim, about them, يومئذ, that day, لخبير, surely all aware. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, khabir comes from khabar, kha, ba, ra. Al-khabar is to know something and to be well acquainted of it. And al-khibra or al-khabir here, to know something and to be well acquainted of it, and no doubt that it's much more than just the ilm. Knowing is one thing, but to be well acquainted of something, this is the meaning of al-khabir. So this is some of the meanings of the verses and the words in the verses, that gives the strength meaning of it, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by some of the signs of Allah, and explaining it in the most perfect way, and then referring to the human being as being kanud. And we have to really stay with that word and reflect upon it, because this is present in each and every one of us unless we push it away from ourselves. And that's a great lesson that we need to learn from the surah, that al-kanad, or for a person to be kanud, right, is, as we said before, they call it in the Arabic language, is from amthilat al-mubalagha. Amthilat al-mubalagha, al-mubalagha is when you do extensive meaning of something. So when you say, for example, someone is ungrateful, right? What level of ungratefulness? Al-kanud is the highest level of ungratefulness. So it's the highest level of what that word means. The most of what that word means, this is how it's done, or it's written in such a structure here. So the one that is extremely ungrateful, right? So that means human beings, they have this in them. So for ourselves to treat ourselves from this by the deen, and also to pay attention to those who are dealing with us, that they have this in them. So don't expect so much. You just need to wish for what is good for them by making them change that to be people that are grateful. So if the human beings are like this to the Lord, and that's something that can happen to anyone, that means a person has to work on himself. So he should not be always asking for others to fulfill his rights when he's not fulfilling their rights. Or a person wants from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and expects from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him everything that he wishes for. And you see how he becomes miserable, the human being, when something that he wished for didn't happen. But at the same time, he's not fulfilling the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way he ought to. Right? So this is how the human beings are. So how to benefit from this is not to be like this, is to struggle with oneself to be grateful to Allah, to struggle with oneself to be patient with the orders of Allah, and to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if a person look at the ayat of Allah, he would see the signs of Allah that by necessity makes a person more grateful to Allah. Because He subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that deserves for every breath a person takes to be grateful to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it shows that how the mushrikeen, they're so ungrateful to Allah, and how evil that is, and how that this is sickness and the disease in the heart when someone is not upon that humbleness and gratefulness to Allah. So as a result of that, when we look briefly on the benefits of the surah, the things again that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by, to look at these ayat from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only swears by something that is great from His creation. And we can go on and on of what the horses do when it runs and when it attacks and when it's in the army. And as we said, it's not about warfare. And then now we can reflect about what's used in nowadays warfares. No, it's about the creation of Allah that He created, and it's still present, and it's still in the characteristics of the horses today. For people to reflect upon this, how it's its strength and in its speed and its intents of running and things like this. This is all from the ayat of Allah. Yes, a person can benefit from that is with regards to al-jihad fi sabilillah, that this is part of the deen of Allah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would created certain things for people to be helped with matters of al-jihad. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about al-hadid, وأنزلنا الحديد فيه بأس شديد ومنافع للناس وليعلم ما ينصره ورسله بالغيب وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَا يَنْصُرُهُ وَرُسُلَهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down al-hadid, or iron, that has benefits for the people. And one of the wisdom behind it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows who would give victory to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam with matters of unseen. When people would use the iron or the hadid in whether it's to spread evil by having weapons and arms and things like this, to spread evil, or to spread the truth and to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. So this can be used in any time, in any place. So this is, again, the signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here. And if it's for the battlefield and how the people, they go through so many different difficulties and the naqa and the dust and things like this, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said, لا يجتمع غبار في سبيل الله ودخان جهنم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. That the dust that a person would have in the jihad fi sabilillah, fighting for the sake of Allah, that person is not going to have two types of dusts, one or not the other. Since he had this in this world, he will be saved from the smoke of the hellfire as a reward for that person. And it's always the reward in the hereafter is from the same sort of deed that a person did, and the same thing for the punishment. So not to be always looking for what's more relaxing or what's more easy, even though it's okay. The Prophet ﷺ, every time he's given the choices of two things, he would choose what's easier as long as it's not a sin, but to prepare oneself to be upon al-haq. And al-haq requires for the person to be patient, and it's not going to be always something that would fit one's desire. There is virtue, by the way, since the khayl is mentioned, the horses are mentioned. There's virtue in the khayl, or in the horses, and that's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said alayhi salatu wasalam, al-khayru ma'qudun fi nawasiha al-khayr ila yawm al-qiyamah. That al-khayl, the khayr, the goodness, is tied by its forehead till the day of judgment. So this is always barakah. The horses are always good. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he talked about al-khayl, or the horses, and that can also applies in many things in our life, there are of three types. To one person is ajr, a reward. For one person it's a sitr, concealing. And for one person it's a sin. Then he said alayhi salatu wassalam, as for the one that has a reward for him, فَالرَّجُلُ يَتَّخِذُهَا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. The man, when he takes the horse fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah, and he prepares it and makes it ready for it. And this type of horse that a person has, the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing that would go into its stomach of food unless the person is given ajr and reward for it. And if he takes it outside for it to walk around and to eat from whatever, he gets everything that she eats or it eats, he gets a reward for it. Even as the Prophet, and he said, the Prophet, the Hadith even actually mentioned the details. If he takes it to a river, he gets the reward for every drop of water that this horse drinks. He gets a reward from that. Even the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the reward in its urine and it's the things that the drops and things like this. This is all rewardable. Why? Because he kept it for the sake of Allah, for the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be superior. And the Prophet ﷺ said, even if it walks to the east or the west, even if it walks for a few steps here or there, every step it takes, he gets a reward for it. Such a great reward from Allah. All of that because of the sincere intention that it's kept to be for the sake of Allah. And as for the one that is sitr or concealing, is for the man that takes it as a means of beauty, something good to have, but he does not forget the right of riding. That means he helps people to ride on it and things like this. He's not greedy with it. And as for the one that has a sin, is the one that takes it to be arrogant and to show off. And can we apply the same thing for cars and things like this? Maybe a person can get lots of reward the way that he uses his cars. Is it used for the sake of Allah, for goodness, or it's used for evil actions, or it's just used for the necessities or for the needs, right? So these are levels of good deeds. But again, since the khayl is mentioned, so it talks about, or the hadith talks about, some of the virtues of it, and it's one of the signs of Allah. And those who knows how they act and how they deal with things, it's amazing sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, one of the benefits that we get to see here, besides the reflecting upon the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know that the human being have bad traits that needs to be worked on. That means each and every one of us, myself, yourself, everyone. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He is successful, the one that purified himself. And he ruined himself, the one that did not purify himself. So that means we have to purify ourselves. It does not happen by default or by itself. We have to purify, we have to work on ourselves to remove these evil things from it. And that's by being ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also to human beings. And that's one of the sins that is very evil, and it can be extremely punishable. When the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about the woman being ungrateful to her husband when he's kind to her all of his life, and then he do one thing bad to her, she would say, I've never seen any goodness from you. And that's why, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that was a reason for someone to enter even the hellfire. So to be grateful to Allah and to be grateful to people, whoever is not grateful to the people, he's not grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these types of things for a person to pay attention, not to be among those who have this kanud or this ungratefulness. Now, also we see in the ayat the importance of the belief in the hereafter, and that's what gets the person to change any bad deed in one's life, is by remembering the hereafter. The hereafter is always the common factor for any goodness in our life. Why? Because a person sees the reality of things when he looks into the hereafter, right? So if a person wants to fix this ungratefulness in him, what should he do? He should remember the day when he dies, the stay in the grave, the day of judgment, and that in the day of judgment, what's in the chest, what's in the heart will be exposed. So we can deceive people, we can deceive ourselves even in this life by how people are praising us, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows what's in the hearts. So that's why the relationship between human beings being kanud and the fact that believing in the hereafter and knowing that this is going to be the case, so therefore a person would work on himself not to be ungrateful, but rather to be grateful. And how that the love of the wealth in this world is intense. So be prepared to be tested with that. Are you going to make the love of the wealth make you disobedient to Allah and make you ungrateful to Allah? Or it's going to be used for the opposite, to be grateful to Allah and to take it from what's halal and so on. So the mal in itself or the wealth in itself is not condemned. It's how the love of the human being to the wealth is not necessarily condemned, but the intense love of it can lead the person to the disobedience of Allah. So getting to know the things that would be in the day of judgment, when people would be exposed, and what used to be hidden in one's hearts will be exposed in the day of judgment. So it's better for a person to expose himself to himself, not to others, in this world. And how to expose ourselves, and that's a very important benefit here, as the ulama they mentioned. You would never be able to know yourself. Never. So if you're trying to see, oh, okay, I need to know what's my mistakes so that I can fix it. How weak are the human beings that they are not able to really see all of their weaknesses and their mistakes. So how to deal with it then? Because it's inside, it's hidden. The closest person to you might not even know anything about it. So how to do this before the day of judgment, before it's too late, is to read the Quran, and whatever bad characteristics that is mentioned in it, accuse yourself of it in a healthy way. So, and then take the remedy for it by staying away from it. This is how to fix the evil things in our hearts, and not to wait for some form of symptoms checking whether we have this or not. As mentioned before many times, don't say I don't have kibr. No, say I have kibr. Therefore, I need to take the medicine to remove the kibr and the arrogance from my heart, and that is to humble oneself to the truth, and to always work upon this, and not to look down at people and things like this. Right? If a person, with regards to ungratefulness, a person should not praise himself. Right? No matter what we do in matters of worship, we're not fulfilling the shukr and the gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way it ought to be. So part of which is that if a person feels or has that deed in his heart that he's not able to fulfill the rights of Allah, that by itself is means of goodness and purifications of one's soul, rather than being arrogant and so on. And to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well acquainted of his slaves and his creation, and that will be clearly shown in the day of judgment when everybody will see it. So believing in the hereafter, the hearts are the place of goodness or evil. التقوى ها هنا, التقوى ها هنا, التقوى ها هنا. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said, التقوى ها هنا, and he pointed at his chest. وحصل ما في الصدور. What's in the chest, the breasts will be obtained, will become apparent. So the Prophet ﷺ said the taqwa is here in the heart, and if the heart is sound and good, then everything else will be sound and good. And how we are so much keen to make sure that our physical body and appearance is perfect and so on, as even more importantly is what's in the heart of devotion and sincerity and goodness towards others and being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from that and to purify our hearts, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.